Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to your Innovation, Grants, Technology, Commerce, and Trade Committee. I am joined by my colleague, Councilmember Krikorian. We do not have a quorum today, so we will make recommendations as two members of the committee to the full council, and then it will be taken up, whatever we move forward will be taken up in full council. Consequently, we'll do all general public comment and item comment at the end. Technically, we don't have to do any of that, but we'll do that after all the items are done. And so let's begin with item number one. Mr. Espinosa, would you please read that into the record?
Item number one are reports from the Board of Airport Commissioners and the City Attorney. A resolution of necessity and ordinance relative to finding that the public interest and necessity require the acquisition by eminent domain of 37 properties in the Manchester Square area of the city.
And I should say, I don't know that anyone in the audience is here for items 3, 4, or 5, but it was going to be my recommendation to do those items on consent. We're not doing a consent calendar, but for folks who are here on 3, 4, and 5, we're not going to have discussion on those items. We're just going to, assuming my colleague is okay with that, we're going to move 3, 4, and 5 to get at the end. So that's just FYI for anyone in the audience. So let's begin with item number 1. There's a lot of properties in Manchester Square that have been acquired by LAWA or vacant lots. So if you guys could provide a brief history of how LAWA, how we got to this point and what's before the committee today.
So in the late 90s, we began a residential voluntary acquisition program, and that is because it's in an incompatible use for the airport noise, and we needed to buy these properties, which are all residential, and eventually do something with the property that is a compatible use with the airport noise mitigation program. We, over the years, have bought predominantly all of them. We are down to 37 properties. We're trying to wrap up the airport noise mitigation program. So with the 37 we have left, the board approved some purchase and sale agreements last Thursday. We only really have 22 left. We are in negotiations with most of them, pretty close to some more that we would take to the board July 13th. We've only had one rejection, and we are meeting with that gentleman tomorrow, and hopefully we can change that rejection into a negotiation. And that's our status.
Any other opening comments?
I just need to point out as a technical correction, the board recommendation number 2 specifies acquisition of property singular. That should be properties plural when the committee makes its ultimate recommendation.
Okay, so we can ask that be included in the recommendations to make that change. Did any of the property owners show up to the BOAC meeting?
Yes, they did. There were representatives from 3 different properties, and 2 of them were represented by legal counsel, who just put in a note into the record that they did not agree with the valuation. And so we'll be hopefully talking to them and negotiating the price. One gentleman, an elderly gentleman, did speak. He had a lot of history with LAWA, not always happy history. And so that is the gentleman that had rejected the offer. We talked to him probably for about 20 minutes after the meeting, and we're meeting with him tomorrow at 1 o'clock to talk to him.
Great. And obviously, there are advantages to a friendly condemnation process, tax-wise and otherwise, so hopefully that will work. And the timeline for acquiring the properties and the whole relocating and completing that process?
The timeline with hopefully we continue to bring voluntary acquisitions. We are going through all the proper notice procedures and stuff. If we have to take any of them to court, it would be in the fall, just because of the rules. We are way ahead of schedule on the relocations from, if you remember, when we bought the 35 properties last year. So that we're happy because I thought we would have some issues. So we're hoping to have everyone relocated at the worst case scenario by next December.
Great. And that works for all of LAWA's needs as well, I assume.
Yes.
Great. And the Bright Star Charter, it's not on the list, and there's a separate process for that, is that right?
Yeah, it's a separate process, and there's actually two things happening there. LAUSD owns the property, so we have to do an acquisition with LAUSD. Bright Star is the tenant. We are hoping on the July 13th meeting to have a relocation agreement we've negotiated with Bright Star to come before the board. So that helps us with the tenant. We have some valuation methodology discussions going on with the LAUSD, but they are friendly, and so we are just continuing on with the process. We're hoping by the end of this year to have that all wrapped up. So.
Great. Any additional questions or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you take one step back for me, please, and explain to me what's the dividing line between compatible and incompatible land uses because of noise mitigation purposes? Is that defined in some way by federal law, or is that a decision that we make as a land use matter? What are the incompatible, specifically the incompatible uses?
Unfortunately, what was there, and it is under state and federal law. I don't remember what the noise decibels are, but residential and schools are not allowed in certain zones at the airport. And this whole community or part of the community falls in that zone. And then there's also a further law and federal law that if a community would be broken up further, then you can take the whole thing. Okay. And so at some point in time when it was all voluntary, they all agreed that they would like the whole community to be acquired.
And for purposes of the application of this statute, is residential use defined as permanent residential use? And where I'm going with this is, could it be possible within the noise mitigation area to have a permanent residential neighborhood be an incompatible use, but, for example, short-term homeless shelters or safe parking zones, could that be a compatible use, whereas a permanent residential neighborhood would be an incompatible use?
The residential part is an incompatible use. I'm not exactly...
Even if it's short-term shelter?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
But maybe safe parking, because it's not a...
If it's used for residential parking,
yeah. I guess
I don't believe the federal or state regulations have that level of granularity. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Well, going to recommend, as a recommendation of two committee members, that we approve the LAWA and CAO recommendations, adopt the resolution of necessity and draft ordinance, and add in the amendment that was asked for in terms of the plural versus singular. Was there something else? Is it? No.
No.
Okay. Without objection, that's the order.
Thank you.
Move on to item number 2. Excuse me, Mr. Herman, please don't speak out. As I mentioned at the beginning of the hearing, since this is not we don't have a quorum, as a courtesy to you, the one person who had public comment, when we're done with everything, we'll allow you 2 minutes to do public comment on whatever you want. But we're going to go through the items first and save the time of all the good people that are here. So, if you would read item number 2 into the record.
Item number 2 is a report from the Innovation and Performance Commission relative to the progress of the Innovation Funds 2-year pilot.
Great. We have Ms. Swan and
Well, good afternoon.
Welcome.
Hi, I'm Bianca Swan, Project Coordinator for the Innovation Performance Commission and the Innovation Fund. I'm joined here by our Commission President, Todd Sargent, and we're here to proudly present the Innovation Fund report and take any questions the committee may have. The Innovation Fund was launched as a pilot program in November 2014 and is a $1 million fund to provide one-time funding to city departments for ideas submitted by city employees from every level that will help enhance, innovate, and transform how the city delivers its services. The IPC worked with the Office of the City Administrative Officer, Council offices, and the Office of the Mayor to provide structure to the process and implementation of the fund at the time. I'm sorry, yeah, at the time, Los Angeles was one of a handful of cities experimenting with this holistic approach in addressing innovation and change to the service delivery model by a municipality. When the Innovation Fund officially launched, the Commission was overwhelmed by the response. Submissions from all city departments poured in, and it became clear that this avenue for insight and ideas was needed and appreciated. The Innovation Fund's pilot period ran from November 2014 to June 2016. During that time, the Commission received over 400 submissions. Of those 400, 24 submissions were funded and are either currently being or recently completed their pilot stage. Over the pilot period, the Innovation Fund has provided $1.85 million in funding to over 13 city departments. Overall, the Innovation Fund has been successful. Through the Innovation Fund, real change has taken place. It could be seen and felt both internally and externally. Whether it's assisting and revolutionizing how the fire department provides life-saving services or helping the Bureau of Engineering leap forward into the 21st century with the purchase of a 3D printer. The IPC is proud of the results from the Innovation Fund and to date has funded over 30 Innovation Fund ideas, providing over $2.6 million in funding to city departments. Over the period of the pilot period, we have, with great success comes many challenges and lessons learned, and along the way, the Innovation Fund has learned those lessons, and we've learned to build upon them as well. Some of those include how well thought out original submissions may be, dealing with responsiveness from submitters and departments, how to navigate around the reduction in funding, website upgrades and a delay in the submission management software integration tool, tracking metrics, funds spent, identifying common themes relative to multiple or all city departments, maintaining employee engagement, and identifying Innovation Fund ideas versus budget requests. The IPC and the City of LA have received numerous calls from cities around the country in the Innovation Fund, about the Innovation Fund and how we did it and how to replicate it. And so, they say imitation is the greatest form of flattery. And so we're very flattered by the imitation, by the calls, by people trying to find out how we did it and to just replicate what we're doing. So we're really excited about that. We just want to thank members of council. We want to thank the CAO. We want to thank the Office of the Mayor. We want to thank the Commission. Most of all, we want to thank the city employees because we couldn't have done this without them and their ideas. So we're really just excited about that. Commissioner Sargent will take over for the future of the fund.
Thank you, Ms. Swan, and thank you, council members. Just to add on to what Ms. Swan had said, we're about to launch what we'd like to think of as the next phase of the Innovation Fund. So beginning July 1st, we're going to be doing an extensive outreach to neighborhood councils via the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. And we're very excited about what that new audience for submissions will bring. Obviously, the funding will still stay within the city departments, but the ideas now can come from outside of city employees. And that has been in the plans for quite some time since our initial pilot. We did require our technology be upgraded, which Ms. Swan spoke to previously. We were working off of Google Documents, and it was a very time-intensive and manual process. And so we're just about there, working with ITA. And our website's been upgraded. Our submission process and working with the Adobe tools are really close. We're down to the wire on this one, but we do anticipate that it'll be an exciting new program for the neighborhood councils to engage with solutions. We just wanted to get some guidance from the committee in regards to feedback on what is innovative. We've had, progressive feedback over time of what we considered to be innovative at one point in time may be less and less so later. And so just getting the guidance from the committee members about what would be constituting an innovative approach. Is it an approach? Is it a technology exclusively, et cetera? And also the feedback regarding, whether or not an item should be a budget request versus an innovation fund request. We certainly are sympathetic to that process because we don't want to be a funder of first resort, I guess. If it's a primary responsibility of the department in the budget process to fund a concept, we would obviously prefer that our relatively small bucket of money be used for truly innovative ideas. So looking for feedback on both what defines innovation and how to navigate the idea of what's innovative, or I'm sorry, what is a budget request versus an innovation fund request, knowing, of course, that our budget process today will often take a lot of new thoughts out of the initial budget requests from the departments and sift out those what they would consider to be innovative. I've spoken to several general managers about the fact that they've submitted their ideas to the budget process. It gets cut through the vetting and review, and so then they come to us because we're the innovation fund, and if they couldn't get it through the budget process. So there's a bit of clarification. We'd love to get that guidance from you because we obviously are volunteers and not as deeply involved in the budget process as you both are. One last kind of point of item and for feedback is around the capacity of the IPC. We did pass as a recommendation from the commission to reduce the size of the commission from 15 to 9 to bring it in line with more of a standard size of commissions, public commissions within the city. Currently, we have 5 openings on the commission, which out of a commission of 15 has made quorum quite a challenge. It's also delayed our ability to review innovation fund items because if the innovation fund committee is not at quorum, it can't meet to review the innovation fund items as they come in. And because we meet so infrequently, once a month, sometimes that can delay pretty impactfully. So we do have some recommendations in flight around how to make that reduction feasible from 15 to 9. Obviously, we're talking about individual appointees and individual seats, but we do look to your guidance and feedback on how we can effectively move forward and be as efficient and effective as possible. So with that, I'll open it up for feedback or questions.
Great. Well, let me first say thank you both. You guys have really put in yeoman's work on this. It's been a new concept for the city. I mean, we always want to be innovative, but to have this innovative fund and have folks sort of with a different perspective to be able to come in and sift through these things, it's been wonderful. And you guys have really both taken it on and done great. So for starters, first bit of feedback is a big thank you and congratulations.
Much appreciated.
And you should be proud. And we're proud of what you've done, but you should also be proud of what you're doing for the city because you have created some good innovation. And get to your questions a little bit for discussion, but I first wanted to ask a couple of sort of specific questions. Like, did any money ever come back, innovation money come back? How much has been returned to the innovation fund because something wasn't implemented or because a project came in under budget or something to that effect?
At the current moment, I don't have that full amount. I can get that to you, but I did note the amounts that were remaining per pilot. So if they've only expended $90,000 of a $100,000 award, then that $10,000 would be reverted back to the innovation fund. So I can definitely get that information from you. As far as specific pilots, I have not spent any of their money outside of the departments who have spoken to us about any type of delays that they may have had through contract negotiations or just implementation issues. Those monies are scheduled to come back to the innovation fund to be reappropriated for other ideas.
Are there any projects that are just taking too long where you feel that we should just yank the funding back?
The one that stands out, which is noted in we want to fund
we want
to see everything happen. I just want to be clear of them that, like every idea that comes through for the commission to review and for them to approve, we want to see success. Currently, the one that stands out at the moment is the DWP item that we haven't really gotten a response from the department.
This was for the drones, right?
Yes, and so.
And I still remember that presentation. The guy talked about getting bit by rattlesnakes.
Yes.
And I thought that was such a great innovation to just use the drones, but it hasn't happened yet.
And so we're still trying to figure out exactly which stage it is, and that's one of the things that we've learned in our challenges is in lessons learned is how to increase the responsiveness of departments and just get the information that we need in a timely manner. This was one of the first ideas that was funded, so we expected to have that information, and we did. I think the most recent information was that they were in negotiations for procurement of a drone.
Right.
So in my heart of hearts, I want to say that drone is flying up and out and just pulling all type of data. I just don't have the actual information to verify that at the moment.
And we'll work with you. If you're not getting feedback from an appropriate department, particularly proprietaries may be more difficult, let me know, let our team know. We want to make sure that we're working with you, and maybe some strategically placed calls might help make that happen, because you're an extension of what we're doing here on the committee, and if you're not getting appropriate response, that is reflection on us as well as you, and I want to make sure that changes. So,
We appreciate that.
what about the Can I Park Here project? It was 2 years ago. It hasn't been implemented. Is there a time frame on that one when the fund needs to be expended?
They last came to the commission meeting because one of the things that we do ask departments who receive funding to do is to come back to the commission and provide check-ins and reports on what the status is, especially when there is no real status. I know that they had some issues dealing with the signage, and it was a state code that they were dealing with the signage, and so they were working through that, and then there were some staff changes too. But from my understanding, they are moving forward with that, and they've come to the commission, I want to say twice since they've received funding, to just keep the commission up to date on what the status is, because at the same time with the other item, if it doesn't look like it's going to happen, then we do have to have that conversation on maybe, it might not move forward as originally implemented. But from my understanding now, that's still an active item, and it's still in the process.
If I could just add, in terms of the guiding documents and procedures for the committee, or I'm sorry, for the fund, we don't actually have articulated language around reversion of funds. So that, as Ms. Swan and I were speaking about that earlier, is we probably want to bring a proposal to this committee for review so that we can amend the guiding document for the Innovation Fund and share that as funds are being requested, that'll be part of the expectations moving forward. Because you're right, there are a significant number of the projects that have been funded where usually a small percentage, but there is a percentage of funding that hasn't been spent, and they're just they're basically sitting in the departmental fund, potentially to be repurposed, but we would prefer to sweep and be able to use them for new innovations, especially as we ran out of funds this year. I mean, we expended all funds for the fiscal year.
That makes sense to me, so that'd be great to bring back a proposal to that effect. And also, that could go hand in hand with the timelines too, which we may need to beef up a little bit, so that maybe there are milestones on the timelines of which maybe reversion is an option, and at a next date it's a mandate, or you need to get a special. You can imagine multiple ways to do it, but you guys, I think are closest to it to come up with some suggestions on how you would most want that to be, but to help put a little bit of pressure, because it doesn't do anybody any good to have us appropriate this money and then have it sit there, and they could have waited another year to apply.
Additionally, oftentimes the monies will go through, they will be spent, and we don't get adequate feedback on the effectiveness of the program itself. Some departments are very, very good at providing feedback around, metrics and success measures, whereas other departments are a bit less forthcoming with that information. And as we fund more and more of these programs, and we have, one staff member, it becomes a real challenge to effectively gather that feedback. Now, I will say with the upgrade of the website and the tools that we're planning to use with Adobe, it'll be much more automated, and we'll be able to send quarterly or whatever frequency we choose requests for that data. But as of right now, it's a completely manual process where Ms. Swan's sending emails to a representative in a department who may not even be in that department any longer to get feedback on success measurements. And for me personally, as a external management consultant, those measures of success are very important. It's nice that we've done these great programs and they sound good on paper, but if we're not able to actually show progression and success through the return on the investment, that is a weakness of the program right now. So I know that one of our this next coming fiscal year, one of our major goals is to have that data gathering much more robust.
It's even an understatement. On an innovation program where you're trying to test new ideas to potentially scale them, having good metrics is, half, if not more, of the battle here.
That's right.
You could have the greatest program in the world as an innovation program, but if you can't measure it, you haven't done much more than the little pilot.
Well, we have seen that the departments that are savvy about metrics gathering, for example, the fire department, have been very good about gathering those metrics so that when it does come to budget time and they want to scale a program that we were able to fund through a pilot, their story is very strong. And so we certainly bring that example to the other departments within the city who want to scale the Innovation Fund pilots that we funded because of the fact that fire has been able to very successfully grow and develop based off of the success of the programs that they've seen.
And if I might add, that was something else that just kind of came within the learning process as well. When the Innovation Fund first started and we received ideas and submissions, we took them as is and kind of packaged them into something that was presentable to receive funding. And through that process, we realized we kind of had to ask more questions, not necessarily of the submitter, but of the department, to see exactly what those results are going to be and how can we quantify in some way, tangible or intangible, the success of this pilot. If we do this, what is that end result? And so I think throughout the process, we've kind of learned that we have to ask more questions on what those metrics look like. Like one of the questions for the Innovation Fund idea is, how would you measure success? And someone could say, well, there'll be less trash on the street. Okay, so now we realize we need to get the baseline first of how much trash is on the street and then how much is going to change after the fact, so we have things that we can actually measure success with.
It's critical, otherwise everyone's going to define it the way they want to define it.
Mm-hmm.
And especially as you start expanding the pool of who's able to submit these ideas, and you have neighborhood councils and you have other non-city employees with ideas and agendas, having those good those good metrics is even more important. One other thing, and then I'll turn it to Mr. Krikorian, and then I have some additional questions, but I'd like to keep it moving. So the steps needed to take place in order to continue the ESOF project to eliminate the paper files for background checks. What's the next step there? Where are we? I feel like we're stuck on that one.
Currently, the contract is in ED3 review, and they're waiting for the response of clarification from the department. So once they receive that, it will go on to its next stage. But the monies right now have been scheduled through the FSR to be reappropriated for the next fiscal year because they anticipate the contract to be executed in the beginning of the 2017-18 budget year, fiscal year. So they'll have a full year to be able to use those funds instead of rushing to execute it now and then possibly having the funds not be available and reverting back in June 30th. So that's the current stage of that.
And what was the holdup? It was the contract?
Yeah, it was contract negotiation issues, but now the contract is in ED3 review, and they're just waiting for the department to get back to them with the answers for the questions for clarification.
Okay. Mr. Krikorian?
Well, I want to echo Mr. Blumenfield's congratulations in getting to this point, too, first of all. And I'm glad to hear that folks outside of Los Angeles are taking a strong interest in what you're doing. That is, after all, the point of innovation. So it's good that people are trying to follow our lead. And I think your point about evaluation and metrics is critical to this whole thing. As Mr. Blumenfield suggested, if you're having a pilot program, it is not a pilot program unless it provides you with valuable data. It's something else, but it's not a pilot program. A pilot program, by its very nature, is intended to give us information that we can then make a policy decision about. And so if we don't have that data, it serves the limited purpose of just doing what it does, and then it dies. So as I understand it from the way you've described it, that now is being integrated into the evaluative process, into the competitive process of these that the Commission goes through and weighing one proposal against another, and that's great. I would suggest maybe track history by a particular department should be something that the Commission considers as well. You know, has this particular department done a good job spending and accounting for its money and then reporting results? To kind of give them even further incentive to do so. As far as unspent funds, this is kind of the first that I've heard of this being an issue at all, of money staying in departments. That surprises me, and it should not be. I mean, we really should have an automatic reversion process so that you don't even need to be engaged in following up to see whether they've spent their money, because you have limited resources to do oversight with. That is innovation fund money. It shouldn't be seen as departmental money. And I'm really concerned about, foot dragging over something that was a failed budget request that then a department head goes to the innovation fund and gets that money. They don't spend it, and then lo and behold, there's savings at the end of the year that can be diverted into something else. That's not the point of this. So as you're reporting back your recommendations on this, I would hope that there be some automatic controller or CAO function by which that money is expected to automatically revert at the end of the budget year if it isn't spent. And it also incentivizes them to get off their duffs and use it. And if they don't, they need to come to you, come to the budget committee, and one or the other. I'm not sure how that would best work, but basically say, this is encumbered, we're intending to use it, we're in the process, but we've had a hang-up or whatever. There needs to be some check-in that's automatically put on the department to come to you or come to us for. So in terms of what gets funded through the Innovation Fund and what gets funded through the normal budget process, it's a bugaboo. It's very difficult to make a bright line distinction there, and I know that because I recognize an awful lot of these proposals as being ones that have been submitted to the Budget and Finance Committee at some point or another. So how is it different? How is it different? You asked for our guidance, but how is it differentiated now? I mean, what's the process by which the Commission goes through and saying, well, that's something that you should just have in your departmental budget? Or
I don't know if there's a bright line for us either. We definitely asked the question of whether or not this has been submitted as part of the budget process. If it has, we actually have language within our guiding documents that we would not fund an item that had been previously submitted as part of the budget process. There's a general sense of whether or not it is innovative or not, and we often will say that if it's an item that feels like a general budget request, that we would write a letter of support, or we would, in some way recommend that item go through the normal budgetary allocation process. But that's essentially what we've done. We've gotten smarter, obviously, over the year and a half or 2.5 years of the fund to be able to identify those items that are more or less standard requests versus true innovation. I remember one of our first committee meetings with this committee, and at the time Councilmember Parks had made the comment there was an item for online police reports, and it was something that the county had been doing for quite some time, and he said, this isn't innovative. And I said, with due respect, sir, it is for the city to do something online like this. And so we went forward and did allocate those funds. I think the feedback that we've gotten from the committee, the feedback from commission members themselves has scrutinized the requests far more than we did maybe initially, to where items at this point have a look and feel of innovation. There's something different about them. It hasn't been tried before. There is sort of a clear ROI. It's not just a pet project that the department couldn't get funded through the annual budget process.
Yeah, and I think the ROI is really a key element to that, because as I had understood this entire program to be intended when it started, the idea was find those innovations that will result in increased efficiency and budgetary savings. So if it's something just programmatic that isn't otherwise getting funded, it's not achieving that goal. The goal should be do something that's going to actually save money in the budgetary process and create greater efficiencies. So,
and there are some programs that are very residual in their benefit. And so if we think of training programs that we've funded in the past, or collaboration forums that ultimately led to further innovation, it is a little bit more difficult to quantify those specific innovation activities, but at the same time, we're trying to see where those residual benefits lay.
And for those sorts of things, maybe a higher standard of innovativeness should be applied if it's, if it isn't one of those direct kind of ROI things. I don't know if there's been any discussion about this, but I have always felt that there should be some financial incentive for our employees to submit cost savings ideas. I've always felt like some bonus, something to encourage them, the people who know the most about how to realize efficiencies, would be appropriate. And I don't know if you've ever had that internal discussion.
We have, as a matter of fact, I recall you speaking at our commission meeting probably 2 years ago and brought that up, and we did inquire into it. There were some concerns, I believe, from the CIO's office at the time that it would be an item that would be considered bonus and therefore up for collective bargaining and discussions, and that there were just concerns about incentivizing ultimately the success of specific programs. In my mind, this is how innovation happens within private industry: is you encourage your employees to come up with ways to save money and be more efficient, and they can benefit, financially from those suggestions. And so, although the commission is supportive, my understanding as of the last time we spoke about it was that it would be very difficult to implement from a personnel perspective.
And in the meantime, we tried to find ways to make the employees feel like they're appreciated. And one of the ways is through the Innovation Summit that we held. And so we had these big signs created that had the Innovation Fund idea, the submitter's name, and presented it at our Innovation Summit just to let them know that, we see you, we appreciate you, we hear you, and thank you.
And we also do recommend successfully funded items to the Mayor Civic Innovation Award process, and so they do get a public thanks.
Great. And maybe it'd be appropriate, Mr. Blumenfield, to bring a recommending employee either into the committee or make a presentation to councilors. The more you say, there's no way to say thank you often enough.
It's free.
For people who go above and beyond like this. So.
Well, and it has the dual benefit in this case of, as you highlight someone who's come up with innovation, to hopefully elucidate more of that, or elicit that from other folks.
We've seen a lot of repeat submitters, if that makes sense, is once they've started thinking about a mindset of innovation and improvements, they continue along the path.
And there's a lot of passion, too. You could feel the passion in the ideas that come through, and that the employees really feel that it's something personal that will help innovate city services or service delivery or whatever the case may be, how they do their job function. It may not even apply to their job, their specific job, and it's really nice to see that and to feel that enthusiasm come through.
I guess that brings up one last thought. Is there some system in place by which if there's an innovation in a particular department that is working really successfully, there's a really good chance that that's going to work in other departments as well. But the managers of those departments might not ever be aware of this. Recognizing the submitter of the idea is one way to kind of spread the word around. But is there something more formalized by which we can do that, by which we can let one department know of the success that's happening in another department?
There are two things. One that the commission does currently is we have a commission liaison program where each of the commissioners is assigned to a number of departments as well as elected officials to share what's going on across the board with successful submissions and ideas that may be applicable. We get a lot of cross-departmental ideas too, so it's a good time to collaborate. That's been fairly successful for us to be able to expand on a program that was maybe identified for one department, but it could be applicable to more than one. The other is more of a suggestion, and we're not there yet from a maturity perspective within the commission. The county QPC, or Quality and Productivity Commission, they have what they call a QPC Managers Forum. So on a monthly basis, there is a designee from each of the departmental leaders to participate in a forum to talk about innovation, to talk about performance improvement. And in fact, when we kicked off when we went from the QPC to IPC within the city, that was one of the suggestions that I received from the executive director of the county QPC, was to institute this innovation managers forum. Again, we haven't been able to get to the point where we can coordinate that on a regular basis, but we do feel like that's part of our evolution as a commission, and we would like to have some sort of infrastructure that allowed really at the departmental level to share and collaborate on good ideas.
And if I might add, one of the things that we've come across through the Innovation Fund is identifying common themes. And so we'll notice that we're getting a lot of requests around street cleaning. We're getting a lot of requests about paper-free. We're getting a lot of requests about telecommuting. And so there are these big theme ideas that might not necessarily be tackled through the Innovation Fund, but now we could take them and go to departments and maybe draft recommendations, one of them being the tech refresh. We kept getting a lot of submissions for new phones or new computers and stuff. Well, that's just too big of a scope for the Innovation Fund. But now we can take it and turn it into something else. So we worked with ITA, we worked with Personnel Department on other recommendations to take these common themes that can apply on a grand scheme of things, not just necessarily for one department. And then another thing is that the Innovation and Performance Commission has a subcommittee, the Innovation Fund Committee. Innovation Fund Committee can look at an idea and go, well, I think we funded something similar like that. Maybe we need to connect this department with that department, and they could utilize this pilot that they did here, and that could be something that can be done over in this department. One example is the Digital Services Unit, which was funded through the Innovation Fund, which digitized city services that may have had a paper process or whatnot. Well, we get a lot of requests of departments wanting to digitize something on their website or a service that they're doing. Now we can funnel them to the Digital Services Unit, which is now a city entity within ITA, and that can happen in-house instead of them kind of floundering around trying to figure out how to get this service, contracting through here, contracting through there. We have a tunnel now. So we're able to, the beauty is being able to touch every department, we're able to connect those links or those chains.
That's great, and that makes a lot of sense to have it, and that's good that you have a liaison for each department. And I guess if you shrink down, you'll have to have more commissioners, have more departments, but I guess that you've thought that through and think it's worth it.
Yes.
In terms of overall feedback on the, part of it, we're all feeling this as we go, and obviously the questions that we ask as these items come up hopefully help guide this. But as a general rule, we don't want to just fund a refresh on someone's technology.
Right.
We don't want to. We want to fund ideas that are going to be innovative, that might not make it through the regular process in some form. And I guess the other thing, and it kind of came up the last time we were talking about the Innovation Fund, is we want to make sure we're funding the innovative idea as opposed to the idea, why don't we hire somebody to come up with an innovative idea? Because for that we would hire a consultant. We'd hire McKinsey or Bain, or and that's always what departments do when they're looking for innovation. They hire the outside consultant. And I'd say that sort of is a good North Star indicator of what we don't want to do, because that is a means that departments have, and this is set up to be in some ways a counterweight to that, which is, hey, we have the in-house knowledge between our employees and our larger community that we're extending to with the neighborhood councils. So it's not innovative to say, yeah, we need to figure out telecommuting, let's hire so-and-so to do it for us.
Mhm.
That to me is outside of, is a bright line of where we shouldn't be going. And the training ones, as I'm sure you've guessed by my questions as these have come up, makes me a little anxious too. Not that it can't be, and we've approved some of these that are a training module, but it's starting to get away from the core idea. So I think what Mr. Krikorian said in terms of we don't put a bright line on that, but we have a higher standard. You know, there has to be, it has to be more innovative than just getting trained on something will make us more. You know, it can't be that bank shot. It has to be a direct shot. I don't know if that's the kind of feedback you're looking for,
It does.
but
Absolutely.
but that's part of it. Another, just a question, the Google Innovative Lab, did any projects come out of that? What?
You know,
That was one that took me a little while to get on board
Yes.
because of the training concept, but I got on board with it.
Yes.
And so now I'm curious.
Programs came out of that. I was actually a participant in the Innovation Labs myself. I was part of the working group around workforce. And a lot of concepts came out of it. They didn't necessarily result in new requests of the Innovation Fund because departments in many cases were able to fund them with existing funds, or it was just a change in behavior or policy. So, but I will say that there were items that we have been cultivating so that they can ultimately bring them to the Innovation Fund for support. Not, like I said, much of the Google Innovation Lab ideas were just changes to existing processes. They were not items that required additional funding. So one, for example, is I'm working with the Department of Personnel on being able to, they have a catchy phrase for it, but it's basically apply anywhere at any time for a job. And so figuring out the technology specifically on how to do that so we can streamline how folks can apply to city opportunities out in the field. And so that came from the Innovation Lab, and they're still thinking through the technology and the implementation approach. But we do have, I don't know if we have additional items that have been submitted specifically from the Google Innovation Lab.
one of the things that came out of the Google Innovation Lab is the Angels Lab, which is kind of like an innovation fund within ITA that's not a necessarily fund, but it's a innovation hub. And I know that they are working with various departments to kind of innovate on how those departments deliver their services as well. I know that Cultural Affairs was working with the Google Innovation Lab, and it's kind of a hot spot of what sorts to inspire innovation on a city level, on a smaller level. So I definitely feel that the commission can do some work with the Angels Lab and be able to kind of spread that innovative culture throughout the city and not necessarily have to expend our capital amongst our commissioners with their time, especially if the commission is reduced. We do have more commissioners with more departments. We have a resource with the Angels Lab, which came out of the Google Innovation Lab, that can help us reach out to departments and inspire innovation in different ways.
So in retrospect, when you look at the Google Innovation Lab as an innovation project, and as we try to define what these, what should the guidelines be, does that seem like it was on the scale of 1 to 10, of 10 being the best, most innovative ideas, does it fall closer to that side, or was it really less of an appropriate innovative project compared to others?
As someone who participated in it, I felt like it was a really great opportunity to bring together different facets of the city family as well as external parties who are from private sector expertise to talk about big issues within the city and ways to solve them. And the goal from the lab was to come out with a set of very concrete recommendations to address specific issues. And each of the working groups did have that ultimate outcome, which I don't believe would have happened without the forum of the Google Innovation Lab, the participation of the Google executives, as well as there were some external consultants that Google brought in to help facilitate discussions. And so I feel like it was it was the ends justified the means. There was definitely a lot of energy that came from that particular event. Would I do it on an annual basis or again? Probably not, because I think now we've learned how to create a forum by which department leads and other participants within the city family can collaborate and discuss items. It was the magic of, frankly, being able to go off site for several days over an extended period of time and being able to come up with those recommendations that they would not have probably been able to do if we were, in a room here at City Hall for one day. So I do think it was a worthy investment ultimately in the end. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm not really sure exactly where it fits.
You don't need to. I was just trying to get a sense of,
6.5.
Because of my concern with making sure that we're not spending our money on
Yep.
consultants and
Yep.
hiring people to make us innovative, but we're inspiring the innovation from within. So
Right.
I appreciate the answer, and yeah, maybe it's something we do periodically, but it's not an annual kind of thing.
No, I wouldn't do that.
Great. Well, any additional questions for you? So this is great. We want to continue this dialogue in both formally in committee, but also informally with all of our members and myself. I'm certainly happy to continue it and appreciate the great work that you're doing.
Thank you.
So with that, we're going to recommend to the full body that we note and file this. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And that brings us items 3, 4, and 5 we were going to do on consent. So we're going to, without objection, move those items forward. And that's all the items. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Great. So that completes all of the items that we have. Out of courtesy for Mr. Herman, who was here waiting patiently, even though it's not technically a full meeting, but we want to give you the chance. You submitted cards on all the items, so you've got 2 minutes to talk about any of the items and/or public comment.
Wow, isn't that pretty sad in CD 11 that you have a public interest and necessity for eminent domain for 37 properties, but yet we keep crying wolf on what? Proposition H, Measure H, and the obligation under the federal and state law is that you be in compliance not to violate the state law. But again, under America alleges against local entities is that, for example, we'll use the county of Humboldt, failure to comply with Title II of the ADA even after entering into a project of civic interest, meaning access agreement for 37 properties in the Manchester Square area. Note that under program, service, and activities contain architectural barriers rendering the program, service, and activities provided that the facilities inaccessible to unusable by individuals with disabilities in violation of the ADA. So it doesn't make sense for the goat man, Mr. Paul Krikorian of District 2, to make his statements under item 1, 17-0687, in CD 11 under item 1. So the plaintiff is the United States of America versus the defendant, Humboldt County, is a public entity within the meaning of ADA 42 U.S.C. 12131, in addition and therefore subject to ADA. Don't fuck with people with disabilities and say that the homeless should live under other unfair conditions.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other items on the agenda,
Gotcha.
this non-meeting is over.